Hello everyone and welcome to today's session, Confessions of a CIA Operative Unveiling the Secrets of Human Hacking. I'm Shilpa Goswami and I'll be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to organizers or our speaker, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio-video challenges, please check your internet connections or you may log out and log in again.
Our speaker for today's session, Peter Warmka. He is a former senior intelligence officer with the CIA with over 20 years of experience in breaching the security of target organizations overseas. He is an adjunct professor at Webster University's Masters in Cybersecurity program. He is founder of Orlando-based Counterintelligence Institute LLC and author of non-fiction book Confessions of a CIA Spy: The Art of Human Hacking. He is passionate about helping the city-state and federal government entities, non-profits, academic institutes, private companies, and individuals to safeguard their sensitive proprietary and personal data. In addition to conducting his signature training program, Peter is a frequent conference speaker, guest podcaster, and author of numerous publications on social engineering and the manipulation of insiders.
Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak to you, to this audience today, and I'm very excited about this topic, as you will see, and I hope that you will find it very interesting and also provide you with some ideas about how we can enhance our security, whether online or even on our day-to-day face-to-face interactions with people. As mentioned in the introduction, I am an author of 2 books, Confessions of a CIA Spy: The Art of Human Hacking. It is not a fiction. It's a nonfiction, and it goes into a lot more detail than what we're talking about today. If you were to acquire the book, don't worry, you will not get into any trouble because it is approved by the Central Intelligence Organization. I came out with a second book recently, focusing more on the most vulnerable segment of our population, our seniors. So it's called Why Are You Messing With Me? A Senior Survival Guide on Fraud, Privacy, and Security. Next, please. Yeah, so I want to give you a little bit of background before I get into the meat of the topic. I did serve with the Central Intelligence Agency for over 20 years, almost entirely overseas as an intelligence collector. What this meant is that I would be tasked to acquire certain high-value information from a variety of different organizations. I had to then study those organizations and, more importantly, identify those individuals, those insiders, people that worked there, who I could manipulate into facilitating a breach to acquire that information. Next, please. So what I ended up doing is utilizing a variety of human hacking techniques. I also refer to it as social engineering. It's one and the same, for the purpose of manipulating an individual to undertake an action which would be in my interest. I became quite good at it, and I retired, but then I became victimized by a couple of different really important cyber breaches. The first being OPM breach, the Office of Personnel Management. Over 20 million Americans who have security clearances had their data breached, and it's a lot more significant than regular PII information. It included a tremendous amount of information regarding our financial history, our health, our extended families and their PII information, etc. Then I was targeted. I mean, then I suffered a breach of the Equifax, one of the credit bureaus. 150 million Americans were victimized by that breach. Those 2 breaches were the result of breaches conducted by the Chinese intelligence service, and there were a couple others. So I really kind of got me aware, like, wow, if I can have my information breached, so can everybody else. So I decided to get back into the fight and have a new mission. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I established the Counterintelligence Institute for the purpose of working with organizations to help them better understand who are the threat actors out there. And there are a variety of threat actors. There's a list here. I mean, we typically think of criminal groups, but there's a lot more than that. I just mentioned to you a couple of breaches that were conducted by the Chinese government, all right? So intelligence services are really active, and sometimes intelligence services work hand in hand with criminal groups. We also have to be concerned about industrial competitors, activist groups, or that lone wolf. The objectives are a variety of objectives. It could be the theft of proprietary information, and that could be by any of these threat actors for use by themselves or for resale on the market. Theft of customer data, employee data, which is transactional. A lot of times it ends up being for sale on the dark web. Or it could be the purpose, the objective could be financial extortion, ransomware, and that's conducted by criminal groups. And the North Korean government is also very active in ransomware. It's one of the main ways that they collect hard currency. It could be business email compromise. It could be sabotage. The objective could be sabotage of the company or damage to the reputation. So there's a lot of different threat actors and there's different objectives. It's not just simply criminal groups, all right? We need to understand that. Organizations need to understand what do they have that could be of interest to a threat actor. Where is that information held? Who has access to it, etc. When we speak about hacking, human hacking, we're involving insiders. Over 90% of successful data breaches start with some aspect of social engineering, targeting those insiders, whether they're employees or contractors. And there's a variety of advanced social engineering techniques, which I will want to speak about. Next, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Well, let me move forward until these slides are forwarded. Here we go. This is one of complacency is one of the social engineer's greatest friends. We have individuals and companies that think this will never happen to me. I'm too small. Or we have big organizations that have lots of security protocols. Imagine Fort Knox. This is where the U.S. keeps their gold reserves. It's considered a hard target. How easy is it to hack into a hard target to obtain this information? Not very easy. But does that mean that we just abandon the hard target? No. Next, please. We will move on to a softer target, companies that have associations with the hard target. Next slide, please. Yes, we'll look at the softer targets. And these softer targets are ones that have associations with that hard target. Law offices, office staffing companies, IT, service providers, consultancies, CPA firms. These entities, these associated businesses will typically have less security protocols, easier to breach. They already have a lot of confidential information regarding the hard target, and we can also use them to leverage their backdoor access. So never assumed that you or your company would not be potential target, because you might not be the ultimate fish, but you might provide access to the target that's of interest. In fact, over 53% of successful breaches of hard targets comes through third-party suppliers of services. So we can't discard that. It's very important to keep that in mind. Next, please. Next slide. When we want to start, we don't start hacking in a void of information. We're going to collect information from wherever we can get it, what we call it open source information. In the old days, we would get that at the library, but now those days are long gone. Anybody with a laptop and with a good Wi-Fi connection in any cafe around the world, in Beijing, in Moscow, can collect information on you or your organization. There's so many different things. There's data leakage where we can look at this, where we can get this information, but the most important area is going to be identifying those insiders. Next slide, please. Those individuals who have access to facilities, and they can be the CEO all the way down to the individuals who are working at the lower levels of the company, or contractors. Anybody that has regular, unescorted access into a facility or onto the IT networks. Next, please. Next slide, please. And where we find this information, we will find the #1 source of this information to identify insiders will be the LinkedIn platform. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with LinkedIn. We can do a search. Here's the Department of Defense. We can do this with any entity, and we might find several thousands of people entries of profiles, but we can quickly narrow that down with greater parameters down to a couple of dozen individuals. Next, please. Those individuals that we identify will be insider candidates. Now, for us to go ahead, next slide, please. For us to go ahead and to learn about them, traditionally we would have to go out and invite them for coffee or lunch. It's called time on target to really get to know them. But today we don't have to expose ourselves as human hackers to get this information from them. We can get that, next please, next slide, from social media platforms. It's a tremendous resource that we can use to gain this information where we can learn about them. Next slide, please. I'll give you 4 different platforms that I like in particular for acquiring this information. Many of you probably have LinkedIn. Think about LinkedIn. It provides our academic and our work history, our certifications and licenses, our affiliations with other organizations, to include our volunteer network. It's sort of a resume on steroids, but it's a great optic. Next area is Facebook, for example, as a platform. Hobbies, interests, sports teams, your favorite music, your favorite foods, favorite restaurants, where have you traveled to, who did you travel with, where are you traveling in the future. Social economic status, we can learn from those pictures that you're posting. Of course, your close friends and family members. Another platform I love is Twitter, here, or X. Here we can get into your mind. We can learn about your political leanings, your opinions, your ideology, your religious convictions, and especially those things that you don't like, your pet peeves. Finally, another platform that's really revealing is Instagram. There are people that are out there in a restaurant taking a picture of their plate of food, and then they'll upload it immediately, or they'll be in the gym pumping iron and they'll be posting pictures of themselves. These provide us with a little bit of information regarding your routine. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What's your pattern of life? Where might we find you if we want to actually have an encounter with you? Next, please. We use this information that we acquire from social media to conduct a personality assessment profile. Now, that profile is going to provide, you see here listed, human motivations as well as vulnerabilities. And we all have motivations, we all have vulnerabilities, and we'll have these in a mixture, and these will change throughout our lives. But if we learn what are your motivations and what vulnerabilities, we know how we can manipulate you. And we're going to use these for social engineering operations. Next slide, please. What I want to do, though, is before I get into some of these advanced social engineering techniques, I want to pose a question. Next slide, please. And this is very important to think about this, because there's one common element in all successful social engineering or human hacking attacks. Why are humans so susceptible to social engineering? Next slide, please. They're susceptible because of trust. People, I come from the perspective of the United States, and I know it's different by country, by culture, but here in America especially, we have this tendency to trust. We trust everything. We trust things we read. We trust things that the videos that we watch on TV. We trust things that we hear. We trust things that people might be telling us face to face. And this blind trust that the social engineer is going to use to exploit the victim. There'll be that wolf that's going to be dressed in sheep's clothing and be able to approach and target you. Next slide, please. What I really want to do as far as breaking down social engineering techniques is looking at channels of communication. The social engineer is going to reach out to touch you in one of several ways. It could be an email message, a text message, a voice telephone call, or even face-to-face. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk about basic phishing attacks that you might find on, via email. We're all familiar with those. Those is low-hanging fruit. A social engineer can send out an email with a malicious link or malicious attachment to hundreds, if not thousands, of people. When professional social engineers will conduct, next slide, please, spear phishing. Spear phishing is when we're targeting that specific individual, right? We've done our research. We know what their motivations and vulnerabilities are. We'll do a specific attack launched at them. That spear goes out and it hits them, and almost with 95% certainty, they will fall because we've studied them and we know how we can manipulate them. Let me give you an example. Next slide, please. Let's assume that we're looking at a hard target, Department of Defense of the U.S. government. I would presume that would be a hard target. That would be several adversaries that would be interested in breaching this entity. It so happens that the Department of Defense wants to build a new state-of-the-art facility. They do not construct it by themselves. They will contract for this work to be done. They'll put out a public bid. Companies will bid on the project, and then there will be companies that will win. And that's all public information. Next slide, please. The company that wins, one of the winners is this particular company, a VLT Engineering. And so we say, well, let's look at this company. This might be the soft target that's going to help us gain access to the hard target. So we look at who's employed by the company. We so happen to find that the CEO, now it's not always the CEO who's going to be the best individual, but if we can gain access to the CEO, they probably have more information than anybody else in the company on the IT networks, as well as in their own laptop, etc. Sensitive information. So we find that Robert Valencia actually is out there publicly on social media. Next slide, please. We find that especially on Facebook, he's always out on weekends taking his sailboat and with family and friends, taking pictures of sunsets. And he's mentioned a couple of times that one of the things that he really wants to do is navigate the Mediterranean, to sail the Mediterranean. That's his dream, right? Motivation. So how difficult would it be to fabricate an email as if it appears that it's coming from the local nautical club, announcing an upcoming excursion on the Mediterranean on first come, first served basis? Scarcity, this is an influence technique. While supplies last, right? So this is something he wants to do. It's on a first come, first served basis. There's more information in the attachment. So without even thinking, even though his company has had training in anti-phishing, he doesn't think that this is a phishing attack. He wants to go. He opens those attachments, and as soon as he does that, malware is uploaded to his laptop. Next slide, please. That malware will then allow us to gain access to his laptop, which he uses in turn to also log into the IT networks. We obtain a lot of information about this project to include the schematics, and we can even piggyback on the contractors who are going to be going in and out of this facility to actually be able to penetrate this new facility. Next slide, please. But I want to go on to talk about some other areas, and social media is an area which not only can help us collect information, but we can use social media as an attack vector. Especially think about LinkedIn. There's over 1 billion LinkedIn profiles as of the first of this year. Estimates are that between 14 to 15% of social media profiles, including LinkedIn profiles, are fake. So we're looking at 140 to 150 million, and that doesn't surprise me at all. I've seen so many fake profiles. It's very easy to establish a fake profile if you know what LinkedIn's algorithms are for flagging accounts. So it's easy to actually fabricate one. I've performed a few of them for training purposes, and you can do it within half an hour. Establish that profile within 10 to 14 days. Go from 0 to 500 valid connections. You will eventually get endorsements from people that you don't know. And once more, you can also fabricate that profile to have commonalities with the target. Perhaps same university, same degree, same industry you're focused in, same associations, same favorite sports team, etc. These commonalities will help also gain the trust and interest of the individual who is being targeted. All right, so that's a very important, and not only LinkedIn, but other social media platforms also will have a messaging feature where you can incorporate malicious links and malicious attachments. So be very wary of these profiles when someone reaches out to touch you. Next slide, please. We can go on from phishing specifically to smishing. That's the use of text messages. The text messages can also carry a malicious link or malicious attachment. Next slide, please. Just really a quick example. I mean, we can A criminal group can target an organization over the weekend, a long weekend when people are on vacation. They don't want to think about work, but all of them have their cell phones with them. And it's not that hard to gather information regarding their cell numbers, especially if these are work phones, and being able to send out a text message pretending to be the head of human resources of the company, and telling them that there's a problem with the payroll. They need to log in, use this link to log in, and to conduct a confirmation of their hours in order not to disrupt the payroll. So by the time the company finds this out, the criminals have already leveraged this to be able to hack into the networks. Next slide, please. But what I think is even more important, text messages are overcoming email as far as their importance in not only marketing, but for social engineering. Think about the open rate. Open rate is 98% compared to emails, 20%. The click-through rate, 36% for text messages versus 2.5 for email. Average response time, 90 seconds for text message versus 90 minutes average for an email, response to an email. And here's very important, spam, because a lot of emails get, with these spam filters, don't get through. Only, 85% of emails don't get through, but only 3% of text messages don't get through. So we're seeing a trend of text messages being used on a more frequent basis. Next slide, please. Another area of social engineering, another technique is called phishing. This is where the human hacker can utilize the telephone and pretend whoever they want to be. They can impersonate whoever they want to be, whether it's a coworker in another office, whether it's your boss, whether it's your partner, whether it's a client, whether it's a vendor, etc. Next slide, please. And at least here in the United States, over the last few years, there's been able to spoof the caller ID number. So the incoming call looks like it's coming from the vendor. It's coming from the client. It's coming from the boss. Next slide, please. And so it adds credibility. And so phishing is used for two different purposes. It's to elicit more sensitive information that can be incorporated into the ultimate attack of the company, or it can be used to get the target, whoever answers that telephone, to undertake a detrimental action, perhaps to facilitate the actual gaining entry into the IT network, pretending to be somebody from the IT department, or perhaps to facilitate someone making an urgent payment, wire transfer from the company, or making a payment by credit card. It's getting them to undertake a detrimental action. Next slide, please. One example of that could be, let's say, for example, a criminal group is looking at a company that they want to breach, and they're looking at individuals on LinkedIn. They so happen to identify Christine, who's a new receptionist. Receptionists could be interesting targets for us because they have a lot of work. They don't know all the security protocols of the company. They have a lot of access to information, and they're sometimes very isolated from the rest of the company. They're out in front. They can't ask people all the time, how do I handle this? So an individual can easily pretend using phishing to be someone from the outsourced IT department, introducing themselves and providing information. If you ever have a need, just call us and we'll give you IT assistance. By the way, I've noted that took a review of your profile. There's a number of outdated files. Some of them are corrupted. If we don't take care of this, it could actually end up in a crash of your hard drive. And all of a sudden, Christine is like this fear factor, right? Fear is also an influence technique. So she right away wants to take action. How can we resolve this? The caller says, no problem. I'm going to send you an email. Just click on the link. That's going to give me access to the network, and I'll take care of this. It shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes. She does this. They stay online talking, and within 10, 15 minutes, he's already created a backdoor into the system while she thinks that he's actually saved her from what can be a very, very damaging and compromise of her hard drive. But ultimately, the company is going to be breached, and it's going to cost them between $7 and $8 million. Next slide, please. I want to quickly introduce artificial intelligence into this and use of deepfakes because it's already having an impact, and we're going to see a lot more. Next slide, please. We're all probably familiar with the ChatGPT platform. There's a number of them. That was one of the first ones that are launched. This one has some guardrails and how it can be used, but if we take off these guardrails, this type of platform or other ones that are similar to it can be used to do deep dive collection of targets, whether it's the company or whether it's individuals. Being able to collect a considerable amount of information on them, not in hours, not in days, but in minutes. And it also can be used to create very, very strong narratives that can be used in emails and text messages, strong narratives that can be used to create social media text like in LinkedIn. So these are very, very valuable tools. Next slide, please. Just to give you an example of what social media profiles on LinkedIn can do, this is actually one that was taken down in 2019. It was put up by the Russians. They created Katie Jones, and they targeted a number of individuals close to the inner circles of our federal government, trying to gain access to them and who knows, to manipulate them or collect information on them. And we don't even have to, today with artificial intelligence, we don't even have to use someone else's picture. In this particular case, this picture was computer generated, one of a kind. So even if you try to conduct a reverse image search on a picture, if it's computer generated, you're not going to find that picture anywhere else. So once again, AI can enhance these social media profiles. Next slide, please. I want to go back briefly to phishing, and another area of enhancement to make it more credible is not only using caller ID spoofing, but also cloning the voice. 1 year ago, it was said that we need only 1 minute of voice sampling to clone a voice. Now we need 3 to 5 seconds. And that can be obtained from probably any one of you, especially if you answer the telephone. They can clone your voice when you're talking with them, or if it goes to a voicemail. If you're using your voice for your voicemail greeting, that's enough of a sampling to clone your voice. Next slide, please. There's been a lot of different examples of how this has been used. There's been a number of fraudulent financial transactions. This one was over 35 million that happened in 2020. We don't have time to go into this in detail. Another area, next slide please, is in virtual kidnappings. We're seeing these on the rise, especially in the United States, but it's worldwide. And these are very effective, impersonating being someone that has kidnapped a loved one and being able to use the voice of a loved one pleading for their life. Please help me, please help me. And really it's a fear, right? And it's and scarcity of time, because if they don't pay the ransom, something terrible is going to happen to their loved one. Next slide, please. The final area of social engineering, advanced social engineering techniques that I want to discuss is face-to-face encounters, because not all of these approaches are cyber, right? They're not all coming through the digital world. Some of the best social engineering is done on the street. And we can go and think of the power, the manipulation of being able to look into the eyes of the target and being able to get them to do whatever the social engineer wants. All right, next slide, please. The important thing to ask, though, is how can we, the social engineer, get in front of you? It's so easy. If you're attending events, a lot of times conferences, trade shows, people are posting in advance of the event that they're going to be there, right? And a social engineer gets there, you're wearing a name tag of the company, of your name. We can easily, if we've identified you in advance, we can gather assessment information and easily approach you during the event, speak with you, have coffee with you. If there's lunch, we can sit down and have lunch next to you. There's so many ways that we can get in front of you. If we know your pattern of life, as you're posting on social media, we know where you are. And we can use one of the next slide, please. One of the tools that we like to use a lot in these face-to-face encounters is elicitation. Just briefly, about 15 or 16 different techniques of being able to converse with somebody, asking questions or making statements and getting that individual to talk. Very casual, and over a period of 45 minutes to an hour, it's amazing how much information this individual has given up without even realizing that they've given up this information. It's an art form, and it's a class in itself. But let me move on to the next slide, please. One of the probably most effective, I love this, techniques that's used in face-to-face encounters, I'll refer to it as the professional headhunting scheme. And this has been used for decades. I've had experience with it. I see it being used now by intelligence services, by criminal groups, by industrial competitors. The social engineer pretends to be an executive recruiter. They'll call you or a member of your firm saying that they're so impressed by your LinkedIn profile and believe that you would be a strong candidate for a position they're looking to fill for one of their clients. They'll describe the position as more responsibility, a greater title, and higher compensation than what you're currently earning. So even if you weren't looking for a position, wow, let me learn more about this, right? So they agreed to get together with the executive recruiter, the human hacker, and they have an interview. And this interview, normal interview questions, and there might also be elicitation utilized. And it's to learn a lot of information about this individual for assessment. And also we can acquire a lot of sensitive information regarding the company that they're working for. It might be a one-time collection effort. It might be a couple of different times getting back with them. Or the ultimate purpose, maybe after they've met with them a few times and a position has not been available, and this one also they didn't qualify, and this other one they didn't qualify, someone else was chosen, the target can be quite frustrated. And then the social engineer will say, listen, you mentioned to me early on in our discussions that someday you wanted to be a freelance consultant in the industry. I think I have the perfect opportunity for you. You can continue to work for your company, earning your salary and your benefits, and at the same time, I have a client that is interested in you as a consultant. So you consult to the client on the industry and a little bit about what your company is doing, and you can earn $2,000 to $3,000 a month for doing this. We sign a non-disclosure agreement. It's very professional. We're very secure. We're not going to talk about the relationship, but you can gain this experience, and this can go on for months. This can go on for years. Companies are hemorrhaging, organizations are hemorrhaging information that the individuals on the inside are providing to the client, in a consultancy matter, without the client, without the company, the target organization ever realizing this. And someday, maybe it terminates. The individual has moved on to another position where they have no longer have that access, or they're retiring, or there's no longer a need for that information. They provided with a termination bonus, and everybody's happy. So, I mean, this is something that very few companies are aware of. This is a means that their employees can easily be targeted, and it's very, very effective. Next slide, please. Before, on a way to wrapping this up, we talked a lot about social engineering techniques, the process, right? There's targeting of the organization, targeting of insiders who are working in an organization, a means of gathering this information, a lot of it through social media, and then using that to identify motivations and vulnerabilities that can be used in a variety of different social engineering attacks. But once again, the common element of all these things is the trust, taking advantage of that blind trust, okay? So I want to talk about now, how can we counter this risk? Next slide, please. One of the areas, of course, is going to be being very careful about what we post, right? You're told by the company, and the company is also trying to be very careful about what you post out there that can be utilized by a threat actor to learn about your motivations and your vulnerabilities, learn about the vulnerabilities of the company. Some companies are becoming more and more aware of this, but still there's a lot of data leakage out there. So it's very important to try to limit that information and have privacy settings so that this information is not available to everybody. But as you're aware, and I told you at the very beginning, we've been subject to data breaches. A lot of our information has already been compromised, okay? So it's not only trying to be careful about what we post, we got to be thinking about how can we protect ourselves from individuals who may be out there with some of this information about us and trying to target us, trying to approach us. Next slide, please. So we have to develop the security awareness culture, not only within an enterprise, but also within our families. Next slide, please. We have training, right? And a lot of companies will have this training. It's treated as compliance training, which I hate that connotation, because you comply, you take this training, or else you don't have the job. I think this should be offered as this is a training, this is a benefit to learn about how social engineers target individuals. It's not only about the security of the company, they can target you, they can take your entire retirement, money that you've saved up for your entire retirement, and be able to defraud you of that if you're not careful. So this is something that needs to be ongoing. People need to learn about about this, whether it's through training or reading about this, learning about different types of attacks that are taking place. Next slide, please. With AI, there's going to be some of these AI tools that are going to be out there and utilized by fraudsters, by threat actors, and we need to use AI tools to actually be able to determine that they're fakes. So you're going to see more and more about this. But and we're going to utilize these tools. Some companies are already incorporating these tools. But now, what about you, the individual? Most of you are not going to have access to these type of tools. But there's certain safeguards. One very simple one that I think will help protect you from pretty much any sort of social engineering attack, from you falling victim. Next slide, please. We have to realize that these attacks, it's not when you reach out to contact somebody. It's when somebody you don't know reaches out to contact you, whether through email, through social media, through text messaging, through voice telephone call, or face-to-face. They could have targeted you. They could pretend to be whoever they want to be. They can dress the part. They can talk the part. They can even set up a website, you know, overnight and be able to say, hey, this is my company. We have to be very careful and not automatically trusting. I'm not talking about being paranoid and second guessing every single communication, but you have to know, when does it matter? When does it matter is if we take an action on a request or on instructions. If it's a fraudulent request and it could have dire consequences for us or for our entity, that's when we got to sit back and not automatically push that button or provide that information. We have to, next slide, please, verify, then trust. This is crucial. It's not, we hear a lot of times trust, then verify, but no, it's too late. If we trust and then try to verify later, it's too late. We have to verify and then trust. Next slide, please. So that's the central message I wanted to impart upon you, and I'd be happy to address any questions. I think we're pretty much at the time here, and I think we got time for questions. So please, I'm all for some good questions. Please don't be bashful.
Thank you so much, Peter, for an informative session, and our attendees share the same sentiments. If you're interested to learn more about our programs, do let us know in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you soon. So, Peter, shall we start with the Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. So, our first question is, these days, a lot of Facebook account is being hacked and morphed. Photos and videos and suspicious links are being into the profiles. Lots of elderly people's Facebook accounts are being hacked despite having multi-factor authentication. How are they able to breach the multi-factor authentication, or is Facebook selling our data?
Oh, that's a wide open question. I know what you mean. I've even received from time to time. It's interesting. I receive invitations from people that I know I'm already connected with, right? Because their Facebook has been hacked and maybe even cloned. And there's individuals, they'll reach out to you and they'll start sending messages, and they're trying to impersonate the person that you know on Facebook, and they're trying to get you to click on a link or you know, provide PI information because of some opportunity that they've come across that's been really beneficial for them. And so they're leveraging those hacked accounts on Facebook to try to get you to do something that's in their interest. Now, using I'm not quite familiar with what currently is being used by Facebook as far as the multi-factor authentication. If it's only if we're looking at one factor, that's definitely something that needs to be incorporated into multi. And the thing with multi-factor authentication, if it includes biometrics, whether it's Facebook or any other accounts, these things now with deepfakes, whether it's deepfaking the digital fingerprint or deepfaking the facial recognition or the cloning of the voice, these things now can all be circumvented. So it's very important to have these multi-factor and to look at more types of multi-factor information that's not necessarily information that someone can easily find if they're doing a deep dive collection on you and they're able to find, you know, what's the name of your favorite dog, or what's the name of what's your father's middle name. I mean, we have to use something that's very, very unique when it comes to multi-factor authentication. That has to be definitely enhanced. I'm sorry if I didn't fully answer your question, but hopefully I provided something that could be useful.
Thank you so much, Peter, for answering that question. Our next question is, with the rise of AI, will social engineering become more automated for threat actors?
That's a very good question, and I believe so. I believe it will become much more automated over time. I think it already is, actually. And at the end of the day, it becomes more motivated, but we automated. But the ways that to protect us are going to be pretty much the ways that I have mentioned. Is pretty much looking at what is the approach to me, and do I need to find a way to validate this before undertaking an action, right? So we're going to see. I mean, we're already seeing many more social engineering approaches, right? I mean, I've looked at just text messages themselves. How many? I mean, used to get maybe 1 or 2 a week. Now probably getting 8 a day of these sort of ploys. And the same thing with email. So many of these things, and even these phone calls that are coming in. The quantity is increasing, and the quality is also going to be increasing. So, and unfortunately, so few people really understand this type of threat, and there's so many individuals that are going to fall for this. So awareness is crucial, and I think even more important, part of that awareness is going to be testimonials. Unfortunately, so few people will provide information and say that they've been a target, they've been a victim, because they're embarrassed. They should not be embarrassed. We need to share them. They're victims. They need to share this information. Companies need to share information as well, and not be afraid. I mean, they think it's going to tarnish their reputation, but the more information that's shared between individuals, the more we can learn about the different types of targets, and have appreciation that, hey, this is happening all around us. It can easily happen to me. So that's really a part of having that continuing and growing awareness of the threat and how these threats can manifest themselves.
We'll take the next question. How do we deal with deep fakes and protect users against this evolution? Is this something from defending point we can take actions?
There's actually, as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of tools that are being developed. A lot of these tools are being developed and offered to companies to incorporate in their communication channels, whether it's their telephone systems or their email systems. But there, for individuals, there's not that much yet, but there are at least a couple. I'm just trying to think of the name. I wish I had that information in front of me. There's at least 2 different platforms where you can get on, and you can upload a URL, copy and paste the URL into their their search engine, and press the search, and it will come up, and it will tell you within a certain degree of confidence whether or not this is authentic or if it may be a fake. And once again, they're not foolproof. These are new systems. There's a lot, and they're usually behind the curve when it comes to the sophistication and being able to detect really state of the art. I mean, today, about a year ago, they would say, well, you can identify this fake video by seeing certain things that are, an individual that has 6 fingers, or someone that has a blurry, the earlobes are, a little bit distorted. But those days are gone. Those days are really gone. You cannot really detect a good deepfake by just looking at it or hearing it. We're beyond that. So it's only going to be through using these sort of AI detection tools. Some of them are already being incorporated into platforms like, I believe, Yahoo. They're being incorporated into Google. They're being incorporated into Meta, where they're able to weed out and detect some of these deepfakes. Now, they're not going to take those deepfakes out if they don't see that they're harmful. If it's for pure entertainment purposes, they're likely just to leave them there. But if they see that it's possibly trying to manipulate elections or see disinformation, things like that, they will actually take those deepfakes off the platform. At least they say they will, right? But I think for us, we have to be always very, very careful when we're online, on social media especially, and we're watching a video, or and someone is providing us with images, or they're making commentary on something. Think about what's behind that. Is that video, are those pictures, is that commentary trying to get us, try to manipulate us? If so, it's possible that it could be a deepfake, and we want to try to verify. I mean, if that's the only place where I found this information, it's very likely it could be a deepfake. Or if I'm finding other places on the internet that actually validates, yeah, this actually did happen, that's a way that we can validate or verify that this information probably is true. So once again, the sophistication from a technological standpoint, probably only AI tools are going to help us really determine if something is fake. But a lot of it, when it comes down to our level, is trying to understand, you know, what might this be trying to influence us, and undertaking an action, whether or not we're going to pay any attention to it. It's getting more and more difficult.
Thank you, Peter, for answering that question. Our next question is, how can we ensure security trainings distributed to employees are lasting, apply to their daily lives?
Good question. A lot of times now, this kind of security training, as I mentioned, is compliance. It's a one-time, you know, once a year event. Employees, you know, they'll take it. They'll usually take it when they have time. They'll log in. They'll watch a few videos. Some of them are very cartoonish, maybe meant to entertain. I don't know, but they're doing this. But they're usually multitasking, and they're going back and forth, you know, listening to the video, answering a few questions. If they don't get 70%, they can go back and take it again. Eventually, they will pass. They'll forward it to their supervisor of compliance. Their supervisor will forward it to their manager, and they'll say, well, we're 100% in compliance. But at the end of the day, what has the employee learned? Probably very little, because they don't really have a vested interest in this. You know, they want to comply with the training, but they don't really see what value does it have for themselves. So I think the training has to show that individuals ultimately are the targets of these attacks. Whether the ultimate target is the company or the ultimate target is, you know, the financial resources of the individual and their family, it's the individual. This should be provided in such a way that this is to help protect you as the employee, right? These are the things you need to be cautious of. And this type of training is not a once a year event. This type of training should be continual, at least quarterly or at least monthly. And I know there's companies that do provide simulation programs, which is good. I mean, that kind of helps us understand different types of social engineering attacks, whether they're through email, text messaging. But those are created based on what's the flavor of the day, right? What's going on today? And this is evolving so quickly that I think we have to change that mindset of not knowing just, oh, I recognize this email as being suspicious. I'm not going to click on this email. I'm going to report it. We need to understand ultimately how, you know, the decision-making process, the critical decision-making process. What is the possibility if I respond to this request or I respond to these instructions? If it's fraudulent, let me verify this before I take action. And companies need to have this sort of tolerance. Management needs to foment this. Listen, we'll provide you incentives for verifying information. We're not going to, you know, we're not going to punish you if you make a mistake, but we're going to always try to provide incentives for making the right decision and reporting, and have this continuously reporting back to the company and sharing between employees. These are the types of things that I have seen. These are the types of things I've done to help validate the information. So it's sort of like turning that compliance training completely upside down, in how this training for this type of topic actually is presented and how it's reinforced. And I think we need to see a lot more of that. Very few companies are taking that approach.
Thank you, Peter, for answering that question. We'll take last two questions for the day. Our next question is, how to hack a human who doesn't have any social imprint, totally off-grid types? Please answer some of your examples.
Okay, very good question. I'm going to break this down into two areas. First of all, if we're targeting an organization and we're looking for those insiders, right? If there's two people of equal interest, I mean equal access in the company, if one has information out there, the other one has very little information out there, I'm going to target the individual that has that information out there, who's more accessible and has more information than I can use to assess them. So the more information, you know, I'm not advocating, you know, shut down your social media, but the more information you have out there that's available, openly available to anybody, the more likely you could be a target. Now, someone who is not necessarily out there, but still we want to target, and some examples, I could find if I found a particular individual, I could actually give them a telephone call and have a pretext to actually try to set up a meeting under a pretext of why I might have an interest in them and in their profession and what they're doing. Could be a lot of different things, you know, pretending to be from the same university, interested in the same type of a background that they have, and set up. It's very difficult. That's kind of difficult because that's a cold call, right? I could create a referral though. You know, referrals are very, very strong, and most people won't check out a referral. If I call them and say, listen, so and so, who I know is a good connection of theirs, recommended that I speak to you, that's going to open the door. Who's going to say no? I don't have time, because they don't want to what would you say, burn a bridge with one of their contacts. That person recommended me to them, so sure, I'll get together with you for coffee. So there's, you know, or we can go on trolling. We call it trolling events. Maybe I don't know specifically who's going to be at an event, but I know it's very likely that somebody is going to be there from that company that I'm interested in. So you're walking around during the conference, during the trade show, and you come across that individual. It's called what we refer to as a target of opportunity. I'll give you a real quick example of, I knew that there was an individual who was going to be a lecturer at a particular organization, providing one lecture a week for 7 weeks. And so I signed up for the course. I got there about 20 minutes before the course was going to start, because I knew the lecturer is always there in advance setting up. And so I got that individual in a dialogue. And every day, every time we had the course, during coffee breaks, I would talk with them. And by the end of the 7 weeks, we were best of friends, right? We were best of friends, and we continued our relationship over coffee and lunch. And eventually, this individual really helped me in a lot of ways. So that's a few examples.
Thank you, Peter, for answering that question. I'm taking the last question for the day. How can we bypass AI model ethical safeguards?
Whoa, okay. I mean, bypass in what sense? For someone who's trying to use social engineering, first of all, social engineering in itself is not a bad thing, all right? We all use social engineering. Our children will use social engineering maybe to manipulate their parents. We'll use social engineering if we're trying to sell a product or service to someone. Social engineering in itself is not bad, but we have to, you know, there's a line between using social engineering for normal, you know, interaction with individuals, or crossing a line and actually using it for deception. The deceptive piece is where we cross the line into breaking ethics, breaching ethics, or even we can cross the line into something that's illegal, right? If we are actually extracting information from somebody, from a firm, and we're paying them for that information, and the individual knows that this is sensitive information, that's you know, it's illegal in most countries. But if we're eliciting an information from somebody, we're pretending to be somebody that we're not, but we're eliciting that information, they're freely giving it to us in a conversation. It's not illegal, but it would be unethical, right? So I don't know if I'm answering the question there, but ethics, laws can be broken, and sometimes the laws are not broken at all by human hacking. And ethics can also be broken, or sometimes, however, the approach that we use might be completely ethical. So that's the standpoint of the question of how we can navigate ethics when we use social engineering. That would be my response.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you again to our wonderful speaker for answering those questions and for the great presentation and knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Now, before we conclude the webinar, Peter, would you like to give a small message to our audiences, please?
Yes, please. I mean, very great questions, great participation, great engagement, and I'm really happy because there's a lot of people who attend that have some, a lot of interest in social engineering. So many people don't have that knowledge. They don't even know what social engineering is. They think it's a bunch of engineers at a cocktail hour, right? But so we really need to have a better understanding. Please, share this information with others. If you want, I'm on, you can log into, you can visit my page, Counterintelligence-Institute.com for more information. You can find me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me. I encourage engagement. As you know, I'm very passionate about this topic. So please reach out and engage me.
Thank you, Peter, for this message to our audiences. Now, before we end the session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, a Guide to Incident Response Framework, IR Case Lifecycle, Protocols and Strategies, which is scheduled for tomorrow on 18th of January 2024. It's an expert presentation by Ada Ribeiro, Senior Cybersecurity Program Manager. To register for this session, please do go and visit our website www.eccu.edu/cybertalks. The link is given in the chat section. Hope to see you all tomorrow. With this, we end the session. You may now disconnect your lines. Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. Pleasure having you.
Thank you very much, and everybody have a great day. Great evening.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.